All the Young Dudes by MsKingBean89. Chapter 80, 5th year. 'Twas the night before Christmas. Saturday, 20th December 1975. I would literally curse you both with a lip-locking charm if you plan to do that all the way to London, Lily said, raising a wand to Sirius and Mary. Her deadpan expression was very hard to read, and the couple quickly disentangled. Mary stuck out her tongue, cheekily. You chew, Wormy. James held up his own one, grinning at Lily like a lunatic. Peter and Desdemona moved apart too, smiling sheepishly. The carriage was extremely cramped. Remus was squashed up against the window next to James, with Sirius and Mary by the door, on opposite row seats. Lily and Marlene were squeezed in beside Peter and Desdemona. We're just saying goodbye, Mary smirked, laying her head on Sirius's shoulder. It's only 2 weeks, and you can write to each other, Lily replied, smartly. Actually better if none of you write to me, Sirius said. I'm not likely to get the letters anyway, and unless you want my dear mother reading them. You've got the mirror, though, James said, seriously. You can still get in touch with us if you need to. Yeah, of course, Sirius smiled at him, reassuringly, patting his breast jacket pocket. Remus stared out of the window, pressing his forehead against the cold glass. The train moved sluggishly down to London. They passed the phone box he used to call Grant, and he felt a pang of guilt for not phoning again since then. He'd been so busy with everything else, and in the end, he hadn't even sent the Christmas card. Grant was supposed to be studying at the local secondary modern, but at 16, he could leave whenever he wanted. Remus tried to convince him over the summer to finish his CSEs, maybe even take a GCE if he could, but Grant had just laughed at him, as if education was one of Remus's peculiar eccentricities. Matron usually got the St. Edmund's boys' apprenticeships where they showed aptitude for handiwork, but Remus couldn't remember Grant ever mentioned him for things he was good at, only the things he struggled with, like maths and English. And Remus couldn't very well tell Grant any of his best subjects, could he? The boys who didn't get apprenticeships had to find their own way, once they turned 18. Remus wasn't sure. Oi, Mooney! Wakey, wakey! Sirius barked, wrenching Remus out of his daydream. Trolley's here. Don't want to miss your lunch, do you? Oh, cheers! Remus turned back into the noisy, overwhelmed carriage, where James was buying at least 12 pasties on top of all the sweets they could manage. We'll never get through all this, Lily scolded, smiling slightly. You've clearly never seen Mooney eat, James winked. Ooh, I wish I had your metabolism, Remus, Desdemona said. My mother's always telling me I ought to start dieting. Nothing wrong with having curves, Mary said, taking a huge bite out of her own pasty. Gives them something to hold on to. The girls all giggled, even Lily, who was blushing hard. Remus wished the journey would be over soon. Of course, as the train pulled into King's Cross, felt a horrible twist to his insides as Sirius fell quiet, his face pinched and pale. The girls and Peter all hurried to gather their things, eager to meet their families on the platform. Remus and James were deliberately slow, waiting until Mary had finally left the car, then helping Sirius with his own bags. Checking every evening, right? James gripped his best friend's shoulder. If I don't hear from you, I'm sending help. Sirius grinned gratefully. I'll be fine. Nothing I haven't done before. Please be careful, Remus burst out. Keep your head down. Don't be so... you! Sirius laughed. Sound advice, Mooney. Remus lowered his gaze, smiling bashfully. He wanted to hug him, but it was too late. Regulars were standing in the open doorway, arms folded. Ready? Sirius nodded and did not turn back. James and Remus watched the brothers leave. They were almost the same height now. Regulus had a slimmer build, perhaps, but from behind they could be twins. He'll be okay, James said, and Remus knew instinctively that he was reassuring himself more than anyone else. After a moment, James went back to normal. He grabbed his suitcase handle, and Remus's too, without a word, and exhaled. Come on then, Mooney. Let's do Christmas. Wednesday, 24th December 1975. It did not snow over Christmas of 1975 either. Fortunately, nor did it rain, which meant, to James anyway, but the conditions were perfect for lots and lots of Quidditch practice. Remus gave in and did as he was instructed. It took both their minds off Sirius. Remus was never going to be any great shakes at flying, but after the first 3 days in the air, at least he wasn't terrified of falling anymore. He even managed to get a quaffle past Peter once. Between drills, the boys enjoyed all of the festive trimmings Remus had come to expect from a typical Potter Christmas. Tinsel, lights, wrapping paper, late nights eating buttered tea cakes, arty dinners, and bright mornings. Mr. and Mrs. Potter were delightful as ever, though it was evident that their ongoing involvement in Dumbledore's resistance movement was taking its toll. Mr. Potter didn't join them outside as much, but locked himself in his study. When he emerged, he moved stiffly, his back bent, no longer the sprightly mischief maker he had been only 3 short years ago. Mrs. Potter, who was still everything a mother ought to be, had more silver hair than Remus remembered, and dark rings under her eyes. She still always had a smile for her boys when they came in from the cold. "James, go and get your father. It's time for supper. Have you spoken to Sirius today? Send him my love, will you, dear? Remus, you look frozen through. Go and stand up by the fire for a bit and warm up. I've put out an extra chop for you, so make sure you eat it. I don't know how you boys keep growing the way you do. Hello, Peter, love. Staying for tea? Make sure your mother knows." They were speaking to Sirius as much as possible. Every night, Remus and James would kneel on James's bed with the mirror lying open between them and wait for their friend to appear. It was always an immense relief when he did, those wicked blue eyes and a cheeky grin, promising them he was okay. Reg has been a complete prat as usual, and Mother's an eternal delight, but nothing out of the ordinary. The trouble was, Remus thought, pursing his lips, neither he nor James really understood what ordinary meant in the Black household. So, there was no way of knowing how much danger Sirius was in. "Can't say much," Sirius would whisper after his brief updates. "Anyone could be listening. Bloody portraits, I suppose here." He looked tired. "Wish we could just go and get him," James would say, hopelessly. "Me too," Remus nodded along. "Every night the same." The final night, they heard from Sirius the night before Christmas Eve. Was that the eve of Christmas Eve? Remus found himself thinking, childishly. Something Grant might say to make Remus laugh. The irony of it all was that night, the 23rd of December 1975, Sirius was in high spirits. In fact, Remus might go so far as to say he sounded positive, optimistic. "They're being okay today, actually." He smiled up through the compact mirror. "Actually, sort of nice, friendly. Dad smiled at me. I don't know if Dad has ever smiled at me. They keep talking about moving past our problems as a family." "That's good," James smiled back. "Encouraging. Maybe the war has knocked some sense into them." "Traditional Christmas Eve dinner tomorrow night," Sirius said. "All the Blacks in one place. Joy. I should be able to get away for our usual time. Just don't laugh at my stupid dress robes, okay?" James and Remus smiled and promised not to laugh. They went to bed that night feeling reassured, looking forward to their own Christmas Eve plans. These plans, of course, involved more Quidditch practice, but thankfully only an hour of it. Afterwards, Mrs. Potter called them in and requested that they fetch the nice china down from the attic, along with the big Christmas tablecloth. "With everything going on, I'm so behind this year," she murmured, stirring a bowl of mincemeat ready for pies. Remus noticed that her fingernails were bitten down to the quick. "Have we got many people coming this year, Mum?" James asked, as he carefully unloaded the box of china plates and bowls, adding them up to Remus for a quick rinse under the tap. Well, Darius, of course. He'll always show up for our dinner if one's on offer." Remus scowled, but said nothing. Mrs. Potter continued. "I invited the Boneses and the Tonkses, but everyone seems to want to keep them themselves this year. The Pettigrews will be over, I imagine. Perhaps some people from the ministry. Your father's friends." "Dumbledore?" "No, dear, he'll be busy." Remus was glad of this. Dumbledore was so serious these days, and his name always seemed to be spoken with a sense of dread. He brought bad news. The Potters were such nice people. Why couldn't they invite nice teachers, like Professor Flitwick, or even Professor Ferox. Though, Remus mused, as he wiped down a large serving dish, he was probably just plain old Mr. Ferox now. Or Leo, that was his given name, according to Mary. Leo Ferox, Sirius Black. Maybe Remus just had a thing for cool names. After dinner, James and Remus convened on James's bed at the usual time for their appointment with Sirius. But when James opened their mirror, nothing appeared, only their own reflections. "He had that dinner," Remus said. "They didn't feel right." "It might be late," so they waited. After half an hour, most of which they spent in anxious silence, James tried speaking softly into the mirror. "Sirius," he called. "Are you there?" Nothing. "I don't like it," James said. Remus didn't know what to say. "Come on," James got up. "I'm telling Dad." Mr. Potter frowned when he heard, but it wasn't much help. "We can't jump to any conclusions, James. You said all was well yesterday." "Yeah, but—" "I've been to the Black family's banquets before," Mr. Potter said, thoughtfully. "They run on late, especially if Orion is presiding. Man likes to hear himself speak, not unlike Sirius." "We'll wait up a bit longer," Mrs. Potter said, smoothing down her son's hair lovingly. "Let's have some tea, eh? Come and sit by the fire." They did. Goody the househelp came in with the tea tray, laden with the steaming pot and a plate of biscuits to chew. But neither James nor Remus was in the mood to eat. The hour grew later and later. The Potters had a groan for the clock in the hall, and Remus could hear it ticking away mercilessly. The compact mirror lay open in James's lap, reflecting only the flickering orange of the fireplace. Even James's parents looked nervous now. Mr. Potter got up a few chimes and pastes. Mrs. Potter kept bustling around the room, straightening the ornaments on the mantelpiece or rearranging the brightly packed presents under the tree. At 11 o'clock, an owl came screeching out of the black night towards the living room window, and it was only Mrs. Potter's quick thinking and speedy one work that stopped it from shattering the glass. It was a huge, stately eagle owl, the same kind the blacks used. It wailed, agitated, and clearly exhausted from its journey. James wrestled the note from its leg and tore it open. His eyes widened, and he let out a strange, strangled noise. Remus jumped up to read over his shoulder. "He's in trouble. Please help. R.I.B." "Effie, send for Dumbledore at once," Mr. Potter said, joining Remus at James's side. Remus began to tremble. He'd never known terror like it. He wanted to scream, shout, "It's something." James was the same. He could tell. He turned white as a sheet, reading the note over and over. "We need to go," James said, his voice broken. "We need to go and get him now." "We will," Mr. Potter said. "Just stay calm." Remus laughed. It was usually inappropriate, but no one seemed to notice. Stay calm? There was no time for anything else. The fireplace crackled loudly, then blazed bright emerald green. Mr. Potter put his arms around both boys and pulled them back sharply. A chaos of noise and shouts echoed through the chimney flue from another fireplace in another house. The body of Sirius Black tumbled out of the flames and onto the carpet at their feet.